Since you brought up the tangent of your plays, what kind of personal stories are you going to add to it? I know you've talked to me personally about it, but just go over some of that and the differences between taking something and memorizing it and then bringing it to drama. What are the initial differences that you need to keep in mind as you're doing it?
Well, as far as the plays, I've always had this idea called the Tetrama, which I'm going to do about 4 scumbags, one a politician, one a guy who stalked me for a number of years, this guy who tried to rape a girl that I prevented, and then and then the serial killer pedophile that I had to testify against once. This first 3 plays I'm going to do, though, are going to be my Valerie Bertinelli, Megan Follows play, where I have 2 characters that I envision as those 2 coming together at the funeral of the father of one of the characters. The second play will be basically when a cousin of mine 40 years ago, her husband cheated on her and left her and the family and never looked back, and how it affected my family. And I actually found the guy, the lousy guy, 40 years later on Facebook. He's living scot-free and apparently doesn't keep in touch with any of his family. And then the third book is about the breakdown of this guy who was a produce manager at the supermarket in New York where I worked. I've got ideas for a quartet of plays about companies that screwed me over, the incidents involved in each of those companies, because I don't think there's a lot that's been written dramatically about business. Yeah, you can see, like, was it David Mamet who did the play about the salesman? Off the top of my head, just
Glenn Ross.
Yeah, Glenn Ross. But that's not working class. You don't really see many working class people represented in the arts. So doing these.
Just to interrupt you, you said that drama, even up to O'Neill, was just like one big wheel spinning on itself, and that you're going to bring a few more gears to it. What do you mean by that, and what do you think you could add that O'Neill has left voided?
Well, if you look at any of the great plays of the modernist plays, and you can talk about Shakespeare or the Greeks or any of them, the Elizabethans, but those plays simply are not in the same caliber. From Strindberg, Ibsen, Shaw, O'Neill, Tennessee Williams through August Wilson, Arthur Miller, these playwrights of the last 120, 130, 40 years, even in their best plays, whether it's An Enemy of the People by Ibsen, whether it's Major Barbara by Shaw, whether it's some of the early great O'Neill stuff, whether he's redoing the Greeks, or whether it's Iceman Cometh, or Long Day's Journey, or his Death of a Salesman, or Streetcar Named Desire, Tennessee Williams, or Fences. There's always one thing that's at the center, some secret, something. In O'Neill, it's the black hole at the center of the family. In Death of a Salesman, it's the black hole at the center of Willie Loman. In Streetcar Named Desire, it's the dysfunctional sex life of Stanley and his wife, and this Blanche woman who comes into the picture. So there's one key spoke that once that's revealed, that's what the whole play turns on. What I want to do is bring the total immersion kind of quality that I brought in books, in novels, and bring it to the stage where if I have a 5-act play, there'll be one big wheel that turns here, another turns here. Imagine if you remember the Charlie Chaplin film, if you ever saw Modern Times, where Charlie Chaplin gets stuck in the gears and he goes around one gear and he snakes through 5 or 6 gears. Imagine 5 or 6 gears where the drama goes around 5 or 6 spokes rather than one big spoke. That's what I want to do. Like, for example, the play that's going to be about the infidelity of this guy who cheated on my cousin. Well, that's going to be a major thing, their breakup. But it's also going to have the character that the Danny Wagner character, who'll be my doppelganger, the relationship between him and my dad, his dad. And then there's also going to be the relationship between the cheater guy and my dad, and between my dad and my aunt, so that there's 4 or 5 major things going on. And this is something that I got from years of watching soap operas. Melodrama, the most maligned form of drama, is to be able to do in, say, a 3 or 4 hour play, have these things where you soak in the characters, where they're talking richly and deeply about things, even though they're using very plain words, and get a variety, a plenum of relationships that you don't get even in the best of O'Neill. Long Day's Journey into Night has 4 or 5 major characters, and then I think 1 or 2 small characters, a servant or something, but it still is based upon just really 1 or 2 at the most things that the drama spins upon. And to do that, it can be good if you have something great like in All My Sons by Arthur Miller. It's the fact that the father was profiting, a war profiteer. But to do something that's going to have lasting relevance, I think you need to have at least 3 to 4 or 5 major dramatic axes, and I think most drama has lacked that. Certainly, even modernist drama, which is far more complex than Shakespeare or the Greeks.
Do you think too that structurally the acts are a little too linear in terms of, they'll begin at a table, and then they'll get into the living room, and then after that this kind of goes on in this predictable pattern? O'Neill, I have always noticed that with O'Neill, where he kind of has the same kind of setup through every single drama, even if there are deeper things at work.
Yeah, well, that's another thing too. Like I was just before we started this, I was just plotting out the 3rd play. I've got the plots out for the first 2 plays, and I'll start the first one this Monday. But I was working on the 3rd one, and I'm going to have, if you ever saw Thornton Wilder's Our Town, he has a narrator that comes to speak. And I've seen other plays where characters have broken the 4th wall, but I'm going to have that where characters break the 4th wall, where a character may play the same character over a 30 or 40 year period from childhood on, played by the same actor. I'm going to have characters go back in time in plays, and also have one character in one time, another character in another time. There's lots of things to do. There's a play which the name that slips me, I remember reading just a few weeks ago, but also from childhood in school, about a phone call, about killers calling someone on a phone, and it was written by a woman. The title eludes me, but there's lots of things that can be done. What has been the problem with drama is, though, they'll have just one thing. Samuel Beckett will have 2 guys just waiting for Mr. Godot. Samuel Beckett will have a guy in a garbage can or a woman buried in a mound. But nothing more is done by that. I've talked before about a painting like Christina's World, where if you took the bottom right quadrant of that painting, it looks like an action painting by Jackson Pollock. But it's a much greater painting because when you go to the full 4 quarters, it's something far deeper than anything a Pollock painting can do. Well, I look at it in the same way, is that I think modern drama is the bottom right quadrant of Christina's World, and there's 3 quarters left of drama to be explored in that other 3 quadrants, and no one else has tackled that, either because of the lack of total immersion or because they'll only have one maybe gimmick they'll introduce new to drama, rather than combining these things, having characters move between times, as in, say, in a Teo Angelopoulos film, having characters introduce, say, an act or a scene. I've got an idea in this 3rd play where I'm going to have, it's a 3-act play. I'm going to have one of the scenes in the play recapitulate the very first scene. The same actors doing the same thing, and then midway change for a reason. So that's something that's, these are things that I don't see. I mean, there probably have been people who've done some things in small experimental ways, but again, those small experimental things, they live for the experimental part, not to impart great art or depth about the human character. And so that's one of the things to do differently, is to give it all, to not just be experimental for experimental's sake, but to be, don't be Jackson Pollock, be Andrew Wyeth.
When you refer to Christina's World and the bottom right quadrant being kind of just abstract expressionist, And you mentioned Samuel Beckett. I've always thought of him as he's kind of one of those gimmicks writ large,
Yeah.
rather than using it more as a tool. He's kind of like the rap artist of modern drama, in that he's taking an element that should be just partially used and kind of inflating it for his own purposes.
Beckett is kind of I think, a living example of an artist who's an important artist because of the innovations that he brought, but he wasn't a great artist because nothing, not even Waiting for Godot, is that engaging. It's a fairly dull play, and yes, you can imbue some philosophical import to it, but it's not nearly as deep as it could be. For example, when Jessica wrote her book about these two Chinese guys wandering around Manchuria, she took off on that whole Beckett model, but enriched it by having two distinct characters in a very distinct time and place, talking about things, even things far removed from the wartime situation they were in. And so she did that. She moved far away from that simplistic Beckett template. And so that's what I want to do with all of drama, just move it away.
When the two characters unite in that book, too, it's an interesting technique in that that's something that Beckett would have enlarged, but she uses it very subtly towards the end.
Well, I don't know. Jessica has tried to claim, I think she watched too much of Persona by Bergman. I don't think there's really any... they're two distinct characters. I don't think that they're one character. So I disagree with Jessica on that. But
there is a section though where the minds do mix into one. It's used very subtly.
That
Bergman film example, that's the whole film dealing with the idea of persona, whereas it's just a small little building block in her book.
Yeah, well,